And I keep coming back to the point. Well, it's a fact that the proportion of no vote gets higher the closer you get to the actual problems. So the people that see what these problems are day to day and most likely have the best idea of what the solutions are because they're working with it and living it and seeing it, they're all the ones more likely to vote no because they see the insincerity um, and know that this is getting us no closer to the solutions on these things because no one has the mortgage of compassion here. And I think just some people have a better sense of what needs to be done and more seats around Parliament, certainly what's not needed here.
The Cape York Times reported that the AEC is already sending out workers to mobile voting booths, but forgot to tell the communities when they would be visiting, with the likelihood that many Indigenous people will miss out on voting because of this stuff up. How does this series of events illustrate to you the point about the voice, which everyone seems to be missing or glossing over?
Yeah, well, I guess from our point of view, and perhaps most of North Queensland's point of view, this is all about the optics in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and the major newspapers and people, around the coffee tables and the streets of the urban areas down south where they can talk about how this would work and how it will be excellent for everyone. But the reality is on the ground, none of this stuff adds up. When you you go back on the ground, it doesn't ground truth. And here we are saying, yeah, we've got to have a voice, and they can't even deliver a proper voting system or effective voting rights to people there in terms of having that infrastructure in place. So I think it's a funny little characterization of where the problem stems from in the first place. And I keep coming back to the point. Well, it's a fact that the proportion of no vote gets higher the closer you get to the actual problems. So the people that see what these problems are day to day and most likely have the best idea of what the solutions are because they're working with it and living it and seeing it, they're all the ones more likely to vote no because they see the insincerity um, and know that this is getting us no closer to the solutions on these things because no one has the mortgage of compassion here. And I think just some people have a better sense of what needs to be done and more seats around Parliament, certainly what's not needed here.
A lot of people are saying that you should vote yes no matter what, because after all, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not that simple. And I think probably at the heart of a proper response to that is let's not pretend that this is a moral issue being asked of the Australian public. It's a political issue. It's being driven, not a moral issue. It's a political issue. And I would say, with a high level of certainty, this is all about optics and setting up a diversion from the government actually having to make decisions and um, take action on what the problems are. They know very well what the problems are now. They know what some of the answers are being put in front of them, but they're incapable of making decisions on most things, including this. So they set up more inquiries, committees, and people in between them and real action so that they don't have to deal with it. And that's what this is all about. And if you adopt that view, as I have, and as the KAP has, then you follow that through and say in 5 years' time, they'll be no closer to making any decisions about fixing some of these problems like title deeds, blue cards, grocery prices, getting the renal rolled out, that sort of thing. They'll be no closer, and everyone will still be up there saying, well, hang on, we expect to have more autonomy by now and be more self-governing and moving at it, but we're worse. So the people that they expected to keep happy in the first place, that believed that this was an answer, will be more pissed off. And the people that knew it was fast from the outset will be equally just as annoyed at that point because we knew it was always going to end up like that. And the people, the decision makers that drove all this, a lot of them will be back. They'll be out off the political radar by then, and off in some sweet job in government where they can't be touched, or in private sector where they'll have their happy existence down there in the you know the bowels of those metropolitan areas, and we're still left to deal with all the problems and the fallout. So I think this just gives the government a leave pass for another 5 or 10 years of inaction.
So you and Bob will be travelling up through the Cape later on in the week. What do you expect to hear from people on the ground?
I probably expect a fair bit of indifference around this issue. I think there's probably a lot of people in the Aboriginal communities up here that know something needs to be done. They're highly cynical, and I'm sure they're highly cynical that this is really going to deliver anything meaningful to them. But there's probably a lot of them that believe anything's better than nothing. Like part of us going up there is to state our case. It's not to hide from it, or you might be berated by some and welcomed by others, but you know, that's part of adopting in the KAP. It's part of adopting brave decisions so that you're confident enough to stand up in front of those decisions in front of people and explain them. And yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm sure Dad is as well. So go up in front of those people and say, well, this is what we think, and this is we know we know what we want to do to progress your people and your communities, and this is how we would see that it could be done in these ways. And they either agree or disagree, and we go back to listening, and then we keep advocating those positions for them from then on. And all the rest of the stuff that they play around with Canberra, the politicians, that's all a sideshow to us. We just keep focused on real issues, real problems, and real answers. Yeah, so to put some context around it, like we don't mind sort of saying what we think needs to be done in some areas, and I mean it's obvious to say, oh, they need better housing and better health. Well, again, put some context around that. How are you going to do that better? And there's a lot of effort already from existing governments trying to make health better. Exactly how? I'll tell you how. To get local engagement, to get people to go and take their medicine and make sure they're getting appointments. Usually, you need someone on the ground in a place like Doomadgee to go and knock on the doors of families and say, hey, you've got to be taking your medicine, you've got to be taking these drugs, you've got to go and see the doctor for your checkups. But a lot of the health bodies, including the hospital board up here, and all the health services, they have trouble trying to recruit or get people that can engage properly in the communities because when they go to recruit locally, they encounter the blue card. And the blue card was set up, I would say, primarily to protect um, kids from pedophiles or abusers. And but the blue card now extends, it captures everything. So it could be an alcohol offence, an assault charge, all sorts of offences. And guess what? Dormitories can be pretty violent. There's a lot of offences. So a lot of people have got a part criminal or history. So there's no one's eligible. Barely anyone's eligible. Most mayors struggle to get a blue card up in the Gulf and the Cape. So it means most people are ineligible for the jobs that are needed. So in health, if you want to fix, part of the pathway to fixing health is local recruitment, and certainly local recruitment is highly constrained from blue cards. Now the KAP's put three bills into Parliament on blue cards, trying to get a system embedded that has the local, let's say Doomadgee, if a person's applying for a blue card in Doomadgee, well, provided they've got no disqualifying offences against their name, then the locals make the decision whether that person's can work with their kids. It's their kids. They know who that person is. They know everyone in the community in Doomadgee. All these Aboriginal communities, everyone knows everyone, and they should make the decision. And here's here's the irony, the sad irony in all this. But it's actually more just utter hypocrisy from the state Labor government, not forgetting that Liberals voted with them as well against the KAP legislation, the blue card. But what Labor said in the debates was, if we give the decision making back to the communities, then we risk the safety of those children, and we cannot risk the safety of children. So what they're saying is those people aren't mature enough to make their decisions for themselves. That if we really give them a proper voice, they're not going to be able to handle it. It's better us white fellas do that down in Brisbane, and that's the system that you've got right now in blue cards. And they'd be the first ones to call me bigoted or racist because I'm voting no on the in the Voice campaign, and they're the ones that are saying that, and I'm pushing to try and help get them employed. So there's the context around what needs to be done, and the second issue is title deeds. What could be more prejudice? And let's use the word racist in Australia. That the only place you go in Queensland where you can't buy a house is in Aboriginal communities. What for? You say even if they want to buy a house, and which it's not always just about buying a house. It's sometimes if you want to try and go to the bank for a loan to buy a grader to finally, you've got off your feet, you've got off the grog, you got a job at the mines, you got a ticket, and a machinery ticket, and you want to start a little business by operating a grader and contracting to the council in Doomadgee, you can't do it because the bank usually wants mortgage security, or almost always wants mortgage security, something to loan put the money against, and that's real property. And you can't own a house in Doomadgee. You can't go out and buy a house. It's all under a big deed of grant in trust. You can't buy one individual house. So, and that's the same all the Aboriginal communities around Queensland. We don't give them the right to buy a house, but then we're talking around, we've got to give them a voice in Parliament. And not one person in the voice in Parliament is talking about we need blue cards or title deeds. So we call BS on all this, and we just don't think they're fair dinkum. And I think if we go up to those communities and talk about that stuff, they know that's a real issue, and that those are real solutions to some real problems for them. I'm not too sure too many people would see the voice as being a real solution to any of those problems.